Good afternoon and welcome to the Art History with the Artist and the Librarian. I'm Sarah Burris, Community Relations and Marketing Coordinator for the Bay County Public Library. If you have questions, put them in the chat box and I will pause after the program and answer questions. I plan to resume the art history classes in the fall. And for this program, it is a condensed version of covering Vincent van Gogh. He had a lot of art. And so if you want to, there's going to be recommended reading after the program. So if you want to kind of further your dive into learning about Vincent van Gogh, there are many resources. And today, the month of May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, which is very appropriate for Vincent van Gogh. He would have most likely been diagnosed with manic depression, which brought him into low lows and extreme periods of creativity and productivity as well. So that is sprinkled throughout the talk. So it kind of fits very well with the month of May. So Vincent van Gogh was born March 30th, 1853 in Dundalk, Netherlands. His father was a preacher and his uncle Vincent, who went by Uncle Cent, was an art dealer. And his other uncle, Cornelius, who went by Cor, was a bookseller and art dealer. So he would have maybe done more like prints, selling prints in the shop. And so there is art into his family. And his brother Theo ends up being an art dealer as well in Paris. So Vincent was the oldest surviving son, and he had 2 younger brothers and 3 sisters. He took art classes growing up and he really enjoyed art. However, he made art his profession later in life, in his late 20s. He wanted to do something that was good for society. He flip-flopped between religion and art, and during this time in his early 20s, you really can see signs of mental illness appearing. So there were stretches where he wasn't eating well, he wasn't sleeping well, and his parents, he would get a job and he would lose the job. His family would support him then, and his parents were worried about him. Sometimes he would go back and live with his parents, and then if he wasn't living with his parents, his brother Theo would usually support him financially. And he was a successful art dealer in Paris. So in one of Vincent's days in The Hague, Netherlands, which would have been more of an artistic community, and this is when he was being supported by Theo, he worked with artist Anton Mauve, who was his cousin-in-law. And Vincent was commissioned by his uncle Cor to create a series of works, drawings and watercolors. Oil paint was really expensive at this time. So the watercolors would have been more affordable, as well as working in pen and ink and pencil. So he did a series documenting The Hague, and Uncle Cor appreciated the series so much that he commissioned a second set as well. And so this was his first commission and paid work. Here are just a couple of examples of his work in The Hague during 1882, and note how different these works are from what you recognize and know. So with these pieces, especially with the iron mill in The Hague, there is a strong sense of depth and trying to get perspective correctly. So the works in the future, see how that sense of depth and perspective kind of change throughout. And he's trying to become very more accurate in his drawing during this time. Now, one of the reasons that we know so much about Vincent is that he wrote a lot to his family. He wrote to his sisters as well, but the main ones that are released are the ones to his brother Theo. And this continual correspondence really documents his process of becoming an artist. And Vincent would even send small pieces inside of the letters or draw out these sketches to his brother. And perspective was challenging for Vincent. So he wanted to become a draftsman. He wanted to become more technically proficient as an artist. So the letter on the left is one where it shows that he bought this drawing grid, and the top image shows him how he would have used that drawing grid. So you're kind of using it, gridding out a space so that you can draw the perspective where the lines are falling on the horizon and where the buildings are, or how it kind of fits in the space a little bit more accurately. It's just a tool and it helped him greatly. And he purchased it around the age of like 29. So you drastically see him improve in his drawing techniques. I have tangented, but one of the things is that the letters were about anything and everything pertaining to the brothers. A lot of them are digitized, and a lot of them can be found online in English for the letters to Teo. And I think they've just translated the ones from the sisters. There's a book that came out, and there's a Smithsonian article on that. So early inspirations for Vincent include Anton Mauve, mentioned earlier as his cousin-in-law, who was a Dutch realist painter and part of the Hague School of Painting. And a lot of the hues would have been much more somber in color. Mauve was known for his sheep paintings, so that's why I wanted to make sure there was a picture with sheep. So there was a lot of them that he would do, but a lot of them are landscapes. And Mauve trained Van Gogh at the end of 1881 and helped him get his own place. However, as with a lot of Van Gogh's relationships, their association, there was a breaking point, and it was over and done with at one point, despite Van Gogh still holding Mauve into high regard. Another early inspiration was French painter Jean-Franois Mei, and Van Gogh would request prints of Mie's work from his brother Teo and kind of paint based off of those prints. He would often replicate them, and he really liked that subject matter. He did his own he did a piece called Potato Eaters, but he did his own series kind of based off of potato farmers and peasants working in the field, much like Mie would have done. And this is a later piece on the right, after he kind of developed his own stylization, but note that Mie was an inspiration to Van Gogh throughout his career. From 1883 to 1885, Vincent lives with his parents in Nuenen, Netherlands, and you can see Mie's influence in these pieces, illustrating many paintings of peasants and farmers, the everyday person as working hard in the field, not glorified portraits. And there was a studio set up at his parents', and Teo would then try to sell the pieces in Paris, but note the years is 1885. So Impressionism was already super popular in Paris, so this wasn't really selling very well for the time. Vincent really wanted to be able to support himself making his own art. And during this time staying at his parents', he was able to hone his skills as an artist, and in addition to painting peasants, he also had several pieces of the church, which brings back his tie to his family and his father's work as a preacher. So congregation leaving the Reformed Church was a gift from Vincent to his mother. Then Vincent moved to Belgium in late 1885 and to February 1886. So not a whole long time to be trying to go back to school, but he was trying to study at an art academy and take art classes. So it would have only been a couple of months. The head of a skeleton with a burning cigarette would have been kind of a playful piece, one of his anatomy classes. So it was probably painting like a cast of a skeleton. And then he also still did a lot of cityscapes. So this was the view from his apartment. And his brushwork is starting to get a little bit more looser. And Vincent struggled being able to support himself financially, so he does move to Paris in 1886 to be with his brother Teo. This is where his art style really starts to become his own. Mind you, his move to Paris, he just kind of shows up unannounced, but his brother does take him in. And Vincent takes lessons from Fernand Cormon, who ran an art school, and he didn't last at the school very long because it was very traditional. However, it's these classes that he's starting to meet the up-and-coming artists of the time. So one of his friends that he made was Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and they would go drinking together. They would, especially like absinthe, and Paris at this time frame would be the place to be for modern art. Vincent visits museums and galleries, and this is where he's really introduced to Impressionism. So I have included another slide, an image of Impression Sunrise by Claude Monet, which would have been the kind of the premier Impressionist painter at the time. And I wanted you to see how the brush strokes are in comparison to View from Vincent's studio. And View from Vincent's studio, he's starting to lighten his color usage up a little bit as well. And so with Impressionism, you're really capturing a moment in time, an impression, and the Impressionists were really playing with light. However, the question really is, what is post-impressionism, which is a little bit harder to pin down. So in general, it's work that was created between 1885 into the early 1900s, and it's a reaction to the soft naturalistic hues of Impressionism. It combines several aesthetics, which also makes it hard to pinpoint. So one of the aesthetics would have been like George Seurat and his use of pointillism. So pointillism is using these tiny dots of the paintings. And so you can see Vincent van Gogh on the right is probably influenced by maybe a George Seurat piece that he saw out in a gallery, and is trying his own hand at pointillism, and is also brightening that color palette. But other styles include Paul Cézanne, who was more like the leader of the post-impressionism. However, the term post-impressionism was coined much later. And additional post-impressionists include Paul Gauguin, who we'll visit later in the program, Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, and of course, Vincent van Gogh. There's more of a personal expressionism in the pieces, and abstract expressionism, you really can see its roots in post-impressionism. And there's more contrasting hues, and there's more brightly colored. Think of the divergence of these two pieces in comparison to like a Monet, a Pissarro, or a Mary Cassatt, as well as the similarities. So Vincent is beginning to earn his place in the French avant-garde art scene, and his artwork has greatly evolved in a short span of time. The experimentation has helped him develop his own style. In these two self-portraits, you can see both the influence of Impressionism and Pointillism, and instead of dots, he's using these line brush strokes, and it's almost in this like radiating pattern, which is very unique to Van Gogh. In a letter to his sister Wilhelmine van Gogh in 1888, I gained an understanding of how it is a hotbed of ideas and how the people try to get everything out of life that could possibly be in it. Van Gogh moves to Arles in the south of France in February 1888, and during this period, Van Gogh produces over 200 paintings, 100 drawings, and 200 letters, so he was very busy. And here's just a few paintings of the local postman, Joseph Rollin, who Vincent had befriended, and his whole family. So he had painted, there was 2 other children in the family as well that he painted, but I just wanted to kind of give a small glimpse of some of his models. And the portrait of the wife she is rocking a cradle with a string, and that's what it's showing. And there are several versions of Joseph, but this one's my absolute favorite just because of the wallpaper, the surreal quality to that, and the way the beard is kind of distinguished and accented. There's a juxtaposition of color. It's very vibrant. It's definitely one of my favorite pieces by Van Gogh. And note that there is a distinct lack of depth in these pieces, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But think of his earlier work where he was trying to get more perspective, and now he's really condensing and flattening those pieces. There's a lot more line work, and then the wallpaper almost becomes like a decorative detail, but not super defined and realistic. And he's still using those hashed paint strokes as well. Okay, so the yellow house is where Paul Gauguin and Van Gogh lived together. So the yellow house is the one on the corner in this view on the street. And the bedroom, the view, was flattened to resemble Japanese woodblock prints. So anyone who's taken my classes before has probably heard this before, but Japanese woodblock printmaking was a huge influence on Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And even architecture, we talked about them in the Frank Lloyd Wright presentation and the influence into Frank Lloyd Wright's work. But if you want to learn a little bit more, the Mary Cassatt program is recorded and is on the Northwest Regional Library System Florida YouTube channel, and you can watch that. And I paired woodblock prints next to Cassatt's work so you can kind of compare side by side. But Van Gogh was also very heavily influenced. And one of those notes is that the sense of perspective can be a little bit more distorted. You would see this in Mary Cassatt's work as well when she did her printmaking. And so perspective was a little bit off. The lines are a little funky, but it is kind of playing with the flatness of that, the Japanese woodblock prints. And then there's more line work in these works as well. And the colors are a little bit more flatter. And so the Japanese prints just in general didn't become kind of globally seen until they kind of opened up trade in 1856. So even though the prints were being made years in advance, it wasn't until 1856 that it was making an impact into the European art market, and so new and cool. Van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo on October 16th of 1888, describing the room. The walls are of pale violet. The floor is of red tiles. The bed and the chairs are fresh butter yellow. The sheet and the pillows are bright lemon green. The blanket scarlet red. The window green. The dressing table orange and the basin blue. The doors lilac. I just wanted to share because it wasn't easy just to send a photo. So he most likely would have sketched out the room in pen ink and then did this description, which I thought was very poetic. But he is very detailed into his letters to everything to his brother Theo. So those letters are really capturing a lot, and it's so cool that they were preserved. So artist Paul Gauguin stayed as Vincent's roommate in the Yellow House for several weeks. And it really wasn't a long time, but they were very productive during this time. I think it was like 6 weeks total. And they both influenced each other in terms of color and stylization. And these are two of Gauguin's pieces during that stay. One is a self-portrait, and then another one is a portrait of Vincent. And note that it's Vincent painting a sunflower. So during this time, Van Gogh paints 36 pieces and Gauguin paints 21. And a quote from Gauguin, though the public had no suspicion of it, two men were performing a colossal work that was useful to them. Perhaps to others, there are some things that bear fruit. And it's during Vincent's stay in the ROs that he painted 5 large sunflower paintings during 1888 through 1889. And the sunflower for Vincent van Gogh represented gratitude. So they kind of exude happiness. However, Vincent did go into a bout of severe agitation and rage. He suffered from manic depression and maybe epilepsy. He would have seizures, and he drank heavily, including absinthe and even turpentine, to self-medicate with poor sleep habits and eating habits. And this is also a time where his brother just announced his engagement, and so perhaps that could have been a triggering factor as well, because he depended so much financially on his brother. But anyways, in December 1888, Van Gogh had an episode, and it led him to cutting off most of his ear. And the ear was then given to a young woman who worked as a maid at a brothel. And she was, of course, very shocked. And the police found him the next day. This is after a fight between Gauguin and Van Gogh. And they would have arguments, but then they were still friends. But after this, Gauguin had stayed a night in a hotel, and he thought that if Vincent saw him again, that he might do something else. So he ended up leaving for Paris. Theo went to his brother's side and was worried that Vincent wouldn't survive this. I mean, this was a severe, a lot of bleeding, and then there was an infection. So he was in the hospital for weeks. And this is a self-portrait after returning home. And it's not the only portrait in Abandoned, but you can look to see more as well. But the reason why I selected this one is there is a Japanese woodblock print in the backdrop. So it was paired up, and they figured out that it matches geishas in a landscape. And so you can see where it wouldn't quite have been the edge. It's a little bit more into the center of the actual print, but it's cool that it's a reference, and it's something that he probably bought and hung up into his apartment. Vincent van Gogh spent a year in a psychiatric St. Paul Hospital in Saint Remy from May 1889 to May 1890, so about a year. During this time, he painted 150 paintings. This is a lot of work. It's a very high production. In his letter to Theo during the early stay, he says, "As for me, my health is good, and as for my head, it will, let's hope, be a matter of time and patience." He fears a relapse and a recurrence of seizures. Vincent also painted reproductions of Millet's work during this time because he had the prints with him. His brother had given a set of prints. And these are both in the ward as well as out in the grounds. He painted some of the patients, but not too many. Most of them are of nature. And some of these paintings are my favorites. So I definitely wanted to include, because you'll most likely be familiar with a few of them, but Irises is one of my favorite pieces by him. And you can really see that influence of the Japanese woodblock print. The irises have more of an outline. The color is a bit flatter. However, even though it has those flattened elements, you can see his brushstrokes in the bottom are still so textured and very much Vincent van Gogh. And the next one is just another example, painting on the hospital grounds and in the hospital gardens. He was often drawn to being outside and painting outdoors. And Van Gogh's most well-known painting, The Starry Night, is inspired by the view outside of his window from his room in the hospital. He painted it during the daytime from memory, and he did move a few things around in composition. So the cypress trees would have been a little bit more further in the distance in reality. However, that play in composition, this is a very strong composition. The paint strokes have evolved so much from his earlier work, and using that line, and it just kind of vibrates, and the movement that swirls around in the piece. So the pen and ink most likely was probably his nighttime sketch during the evening, and then during the day, then he painted it in color, and that part's from memory. And another note, there was a video at the MoMA, because this is a piece that's at the MoMA, and they had an astronomer come in, and she mentioned that the very bright white star-like structure that's right kind of in the middle near the cypress tree is most likely Venus rather than a star, which I thought was pretty cool. So Vincent didn't feel like he was getting any better. He was still having epileptic episodes. So he relocates to Auvers-sur-Oise, France, for the final months it's kind of near Paris, which also allows his brother Theo to be able to visit more easily from Paris. And Dr. Gauguin begins to work with Van Gogh. He encourages Van Gogh to paint more, and it's very helpful, encouraging for a bit, but it wasn't quite enough. The face of the doctor, when you're looking at this portrait, is very much one of melancholy. And in a letter he wrote to Theo, he says that the doctor is also very similar to him. So I think we must not count on Dr. Gauguin at all. First of all, he's sicker than I am. I think we just say as much, so that's that. And now when one blind man leads another blind man, don't they just fall into a ditch? So melancholy is both with the doctor as well as their kindred spirits, because Dr. Gauguin is also a painter, and he knows a lot of other artists as well as Cezanne and Pissarro. Above is one of Van Gogh's only etchings. So he wasn't much of a printmaker, but it's kind of cool to see him working in that medium. And back to the painting, this one does have some foxglove in the foreground. And there is one theory that the reason why a lot of Van Gogh's later works become really yellow in hue is maybe some of the medication that was used to treat epilepsy may have caused your eyesight to change a little bit and see more of a yellow. And so foxglove was used in a medicine called digitalis, but it was combined with some other ingredients as well. But that's only a theory. Wheat Field with Crows is thought to have been Van Gogh's last painting. So the stormy skies show a bit more conflict in the piece itself. However, the brightness of the field greatly contrasts with that of the sky. And a letter to Theo on July 10th, 1890 shows that this is one of his lower periods. My life is attacked at the very root, my step also faltering. And this is where it is believed that he may have shot himself in the chest and on July 27th, 1890, and died 2 days following. However, there is some speculation that it could have been an accidental homicide by a friend's younger brother that was like playing around and it didn't go well, but there's no confirmation either way. But he did pass away at the age of 37. Dr. Gauguin was one that made sure that Van Gogh was buried and found him a spot located kind of near these wheat fields. And knowing that sunflowers were important, that all of his friends brought sunflowers to the funeral. And over his lifetime, Vincent van Gogh created over 850 paintings and 1,300 works on paper. Theo worked on creating a memorial exhibit, but then his own health was declining, and then he passed away January 1891, which was not long after his brother's death. So Theo's wife and widow, Joanna, became the owner of most of Van Gogh's work. Vincent didn't sell a whole lot when he was living. The main thing I saw was he did sell a piece here or there, and sometimes he would like use them as payment to certain things. But for the most part, that commission with his uncle was the only one that I really was able to find. There was a fiscal exchange. But anyways, Joanne, who was called Jo, she organized the sales and museum exhibits to boost visibility, and she strategically tied the work into collections that were public collections so that they would be seen. And then she published Vincent's letters to Theo in 1914, which then also increased the visibility of Van Gogh's work. So her efforts really helped Vincent van Gogh become the name that we know today and to be able to celebrate his talents, which I thought was very impressive. I included another one of his sunflower pieces here as well. So for recommended reading, these are all in the Northwest Regional Library System collection for checkout. My top suggestion is Vincent by Barbara Stoke. It's a phenomenal graphic novel about Vincent van Gogh, and it covers living in Arles and a glimpse at his temperament and mental health, Gauguin, his relationship with his brother Theo. And if you know Vincent van Gogh's paintings, and a lot of them I included in this presentation that are also included in Vincent, you can kind of see how those pieces are used in creating characters in the graphic novel or scenes in the graphic novel. And it's a very quick read. You'll be able to finish it within a day. The next recommendation is Vincent and Theo, the Van Gogh Brothers by Deborah Hilgeman. I listened to most of the audiobook, and I would probably recommend the print text instead. I think it works better as print. It's very well researched, and it allows you really to follow from his childhood all the way through life, and it looks at his brother's relationship with them, and it's utilizing those letters once again. It really kind of captures what life would have been like and all the influences, his family and his parents, and it received an Excellence in Nonfiction for Young Adult Award in 2018. And the last recommendation on this page is if you're looking for an art history or an art book, one of the publishers that I recommend is Taschen. If you see this Taschen, you're going to know that it's got high paper quality, really nice print. The images are going to look nice and crisp and clear, and the information is always on point. So this one is one in our collection that is Taschen. And it covers Van Gogh's work from 1853 to 1890. It's Van Gogh by Rainer Metzer. And it includes his portraits, olive trees, so many pieces that I wasn't able to include in this presentation. It's a beautiful book, and it makes you smile just looking at it. So I highly recommend this Taschen. I would also want to mention Gary's suggestion from last class. It's not in the library collection, but I still wanted to recommend. It's Lust for Life, a 1956 film starring Kirk Douglas as Vincent. So you might be able to find it somewhere else to view. But what we have available for checkout is these titles. Loving Vincent is one that is fully animated and fully painted in oil paint. So it's like hand animation, which takes forever. And imagine that combined with oil. So that is a high recommendation. The amount of skill and talent used to creating that is very impressive. However, it is focusing more towards his death. So to take that into account. Loving Vincent received many awards, including the Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature in 2018. Another award-winning title is At Eternity's Gate, starring William Dafoe. I'm always a fan of William Dafoe's work. And it received an Academy Award for his performance as Vincent van Gogh. So this one covers his time in Arles and Auvers-sur-Oise, France, when he was most productive. And if you're going to study his work as much as his life, then you're going to want to check out Vincent, the Life and Death of Vincent van Gogh. And side note is there is a Doctor Who episode that I love, and it's season 5, episode 10. And so it features Vincent van Gogh, and it pays homage to the painter in a lovely way, and it provides a happy ending. And so if you haven't watched any Doctor Who, you can even start on this one. It's really good. And in our collection, we have Doctor Who, the Matt Smith collection, which is Matt Smith is the actor who plays the Doctor in this season. So this summer, I'm going to be taking an art history break, and I'll resume in the fall. But we have a ton of programming. We're working on pulling our current event guide together, and I'm excited to share it later. But one of the programs that I wanted to highlight, which I've included in the chat box. Let me know if you can't see the link, but it is presented by the Florida Public Archaeology Network by archaeologist Nicole Grennan, and she's also a diver. So it's all about shipwrecks of Northwest Florida. It includes 2 regional shipwrecks. Bay County's SS Tarpon that was lost during a gale, and the Vamar that sunk near Port St. Joe during World War II during mysterious circumstances. So go ahead and click on that link if you want to be able to register now, or just visit our website and register later, or shoot me an email if you have my email. Any of those will work. And it's also on our Facebook page as an event. And that's geared for ages 16 and up. However, it's still family friendly. Okay, I think I am going to wrap up. But once again, a big thank you for attending, and I have plenty of time to create a great program either in August. I'm hoping for August. Okay, have a great one. Good to see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.